The restaurant was dimly lit, with flickering candles dancing atop white linen-covered tables and soft jazz echoing through the air. It was supposed to be a special night, our wedding anniversary. I had taken extra care with my appearance girled. My hair, wore his favorite red dress, and even booked the place where we had our first anniversary dinner. As we sat across from each other, I could tell something was off. He wasn't even looking at me, just aimlessly scrolling through his phone like I didn't exist. I tried to start a conversation, recalling memories, gently touching his hand, smiling when I mentioned how he used to sneak notes in my lunchbox during our early years of marriage. He barely reacted. The waiter came, took our orders, and left. You asked again in that awkward silence. I laughed lightly, trying to diffuse the tension, but he finally put his phone down, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "You've always repulsed me." The words came out like venom, yet he said them with the calmness of someone reading the news. The room fell silent in my mind, my ears buzzed as if my body had temporarily shut down. But instead of crying or reacting, I just smiled. I smiled. Wide and warm, not because I wasn't hurt but because I had been waiting for this moment for years. The mask was off, and now I was free. For the past decade, I had endured countless subtle jabs, cruel jokes disguised as humor, long silences, unexplained absences, and moments where I felt more like a burden than a wife. His confession wasn't a shock, it was a release. I knew then that I wasn't crazy, that the coldness I'd felt had been real. I folded my napkin slowly, placed it on the table, and looked into his eyes with a calm he didn't expect. "No," I whispered. "And now, you no longer have to pretend." He blinked, unsure of how to react. For once, I had caught him off guard. I signaled the waiter and asked for the check, which startled him more than my reaction. That night wasn't the ending. It was the beginning. After that dinner, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call a friend in hysteria or lock myself in the bathroom with wine and sadness. Instead, I walked calmly to our shared car, sat in the passenger seat, and listened to the silence between us with new ears. It no longer hurt. It felt liberating, like walking away from a heavy coat after a long winter. He asked if I wanted to talk. I simply said, "There's nothing left to say." When we got home, he went to his office room and I went to our bedroom. That night, I opened a secret folder on my laptop labeled Project Freedom. It was filled with documents, screenshots, emails, even audio clips I had saved over the years. Proof of how emotionally manipulative and cruel he had been. For years, I had documented everything not because I thought I'd leave, but because I thought I was going crazy. I needed validation that it wasn't in my head. Now, those files had purpose. I spent the next few days visiting a lawyer, transferring funds into a separate account I had opened months ago under a different bank. My job had always been freelance writing. He thought I made pennies. He didn't know I ghostwrote for best-selling authors, nor that I had saved enough to live independently. I started house hunting under a pseudonym and eventually found a small, cozy apartment 2 towns over. I had made up my mind. I would leave, not with a bang, not with drama, but with quiet, calculated steps that would ensure I never had to look back. I told him we needed a break. He didn't resist. That was his second mistake. The first was underestimating me all these years. 3 months later, I had everything set. I had moved most of my clothes in small batches, pretending to donate or declutter. I changed my phone number, filed for divorce, and handed the papers through my lawyer. When he received them, he called me 30 times. Then came the texts, some angry, some desperate, some dripping with fake affection. I didn't respond, not once. The silence was my closure. I heard from mutual friends that he told people I had a mental breakdown, that I was unstable, emotional, and dramatic. I didn't bother correcting the narrative. I had learned early on that people believe what they want to believe, and his lies would eventually catch up to him. Meanwhile, I thrived. I decorated my apartment with colors he hated: sunny yellows, calming blues, warm greens. I danced barefoot in the kitchen, adopted a rescue dog named Felix, and started saying yes to every opportunity I used to decline. I said yes to interviews, book deals, meetups with old friends. The woman he thought was weak had only been waiting for her chains to drop. I didn't just survive, I evolved. I even joined a support group for women who had been in emotionally abusive relationships. My story was one of many. But it was also a reminder that healing doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it's the quiet exit that makes the loudest statement. 6 months after the divorce, I received an invitation to a reunion hosted by his family. It felt like a trap. They never liked me, always made passive-aggressive comments about my looks, my job, even my cooking. But this time, something inside me said go, not for them, for me. I wore a pale blue sari my grandmother had gifted me. It was elegant, modest, and carried a memory of strength. When I entered the hall, all eyes turned. I expected whispers, side glances, the usual. Instead, I was met with stunned silence. Apparently, they had expected me to show up disheveled, maybe bitter. But I looked radiant. My ex-husband was there. Too, he looked smaller somehow, not physically, but energetically. Like he had deflated, he approached, clearly rehearsing something in his mind. I smiled and walked right past him. That evening, I spoke with his cousin, who told me that everyone had started seeing through his stories. Apparently, he had tried dating again, but something about him just repelled people. Ironic, isn't it? The man who once told me I repulsed him now found himself utterly alone. That night, as I left, a little girl ran up to me. It was his niece. She handed me a drawing she had made. "You're the princess," she said. I knelt down and hugged her. "I used to be," I said gently. "But now, I'm the queen." In the months that followed, I got letters, handwritten ones from him. One of them had just 3 lines. "You were never the problem." I was. That should have felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt like confirmation. I knew already. His apology didn't fix anything. It only proved I had been right. But I wasn't angry anymore. In fact, I wished him healing. People like him don't destroy others because they're strong. They do it because they're broken. He had tried to shrink me to feel bigger himself. But I had grown, taller than he ever imagined. My days now began with peace. I started journaling, teaching creative writing to teenage girls at a local shelter, and hosting online workshops for women rebuilding their confidence. My smile was real now, not the mask I used to wear to survive, but the expression of a soul. At peace, I had chosen myself, not out of rebellion, out of necessity. And that choice changed everything. The anniversary that was once a symbol of pain had become a date I marked differently now. Not as the day he hurt me, but the day I smiled back and set myself free. There were nights, especially early on, where echoes of his words would creep into my quiet moments. I'd sit with a cup of tea by my apartment window, staring out at the soft orange lights glowing on the street below, and wonder how had I stayed so long in a home that never felt like mine. The answer always came back to one word: hope. I had hoped for change, for warmth, for recognition. I believed that if I loved harder, gave more, compromised endlessly, he'd see my worth. But love, I learned, doesn't thrive in conditions of drought. I had been watering a desert, not a garden. And now, in this new life of mine, I tended to real roots of friendships that bloomed, of passions that grew, and of a version of myself I had buried to please him. I started visiting art galleries alone, volunteering at animal shelters, and baking on weekends like I used to before marriage became a full-time performance. I even booked a solo trip to Italy, something I once dreamed of but was always told was a waste of money. Standing in Venice, on a quiet bridge under the setting sun, I felt the breeze wrap around me like an embrace, and for the first time in years, I cried not from sadness, but from a sense of fullness I didn't know. I could feel again. That's when I realized healing isn't loud. It's not a single moment or dramatic closure. It's soft, persistent, and sometimes invisible to everyone else. It's choosing to breathe when you once gasped. It's choosing silence when you once screamed. It's choosing yourself when you were always chosen last. A year had passed since that unforgettable anniversary dinner. On the exact date, I treated myself to a quiet night at home. I lit candles, not the romantic kind, but the calming lavender-scented ones I always loved but stopped buying because he said they gave him headaches. I cooked myself a 3-course meal, played soft music, and wrote a letter to the woman I used to be. Dear me, it began. I forgive you for staying. I'm proud of you for leaving. I sealed it, placed it in my journal, and smiled. The kind of smile that radiates not from lips, but from deep within your chest. Later that night, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I drove past the restaurant today. Thought of you. I didn't respond. There was no need. I had nothing left to give him, not pain, not love, not answers. Some stories aren't meant to be rewritten. They're meant to end, and mine had ended with grace. He took a piece of my past, but he didn't get my future. That belonged to me alone. And that truth, more than any revenge or confrontation, was the real victory. I now tell my story not for pity or for revenge, but for the woman who might be sitting across from someone right now, hearing cruel words with a shaky smile on her lips. To her, I say, you are not alone, and you are not powerless. I once thought strength meant staying. Now I know it means leaving with your dignity intact. Today, I lead workshops for survivors, speak at events about emotional resilience, and publish essays about reclaiming one's narrative. And every time I share that moment when he said, "You've always repulsed me," and I just smiled, I see women in the audience nod with quiet understanding. That smile wasn't weakness, it was power. A quiet declaration of, "You no longer have control over me." It marked the beginning of my freedom. A smile that said, "Thank you for showing me who you are, so I could remember who I am." I look back now, not with regret, but with gratitude for the strength I didn't know I had, for the friends who held space for me, for the life I rebuilt with my own hands. And as I stand in front of mirrors, no longer avoiding my reflection, I smile. Again, not for him, but for me.